Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Ladar Gavei-Lazi, and coming up in today's newscast, Israel's 36th government to be sworn in today, ending Netanyahu's 12-year streak as the Israeli premier. Then, what do Israelis think of the new unity government? And following a Washington Post report, what is the status of Israel's relations with neighboring Jordan? Today is an historic day as Israel's 36th government is set to be sworn in. And assuming there are no last-minute surprises, this will mark the end of Benjamin Netanyahu's 12-year term as prime minister, the longest-serving prime minister in Israel's history. The unity government, or as it's being called, coalition of change, includes a broad spectrum of political parties from the right and the left and will include 27 ministerial positions. Let's take a look at the new government. At the head of the unity government, we have Yamina's Naftali Bennett. And he's making history today because for the first time, the designated prime minister will not come from the largest party, which remains Netanyahu's Likud, but rather from the second smallest faction in the Knesset. Next, we have the head of Yesh Atid, Yair Lapid, who is second in the rotation, meaning he will replace Naftali Bennett as prime minister in the second half of the rotation. In the meantime, he will serve as the foreign minister. Blue and White's leader Benny Gantz will remain in his post as defense minister. He served in the Netanyahu-led government and prior to the collapse of the previous coalition was set to become prime minister in a rotation agreement with Netanyahu. Then we have Israel Beitenu head Avigdor Lieberman, who will serve as the finance minister. Merav Michaeli, head of the Labor Party and one of 9 female ministers in the new government. She will serve as transportation minister. Then we have New Hope Party leader Gideon Sa'ar, who will serve as the Justice Minister. Nitzan Horowitz, head of the left-wing Meretz Party, will serve as Israel's new Health Minister, while Isawai Frej will become the second Muslim in history to serve as a minister. He will take the post of Regional Cooperation Minister. Yifat Shasa Biton from New Hope, who made headlines in Israel this past year for her opposition to Netanyahu's policies regarding the coronavirus, will become the next Education Minister, while Yamina's Ayelet Shaked, second to Naftali Bennett, will become the Interior Minister. There are, of course, a number of additional ministers ranging from the Interior Security Ministry to be headed by Omer Bar-Lev, the Diaspora Affairs Ministry to be headed by Nachman Shai of Labor, to the Tourism Ministry to be headed by Yoel Rozbozov of Yesh Atid, and to the Welfare Ministry to be headed by Meir Cohen of Yesh Atid, to name a few. And if all goes according to plan, the new government will be sworn in tonight in the presence of Israel's President, Ruvi Rivlin. The ceremony for the transfer of the ministries is set to take place Monday morning. Now, reaching a deal for the unity government was no easy task. The coalition agreements were finalized at the last minute ahead of the 4 p.m. deadline on Friday. Let's take a look at what they entail. Yesh Atid head Yair Lapid finalized the coalition agreements with the 7 other parties in the new government: Yamina, New Hope, Blue and White, Israel Beitenu, Labor, Meretz, and Ram. The new coalition includes 61 members, a slight majority in the 120-seat Knesset. With the signing of the agreements, Naftali Bennett said that it brings an end to 2.5 years of political crisis, saying his government will work for all the Israeli public, religious, secular, ultra-Orthodox, and Arab without exception. While Lapid said the government would place the good of the country at the top of its agenda, saying all the partners are committed first and foremost to the people of Israel. The coalition issued a list outlining the key issues and principles of the new government, and they include establishing a state commission of inquiry into the tragic events on Lag BaOmer, in which 45 people were killed on Mount Meron in northern Israel. The coalition will also work to establish 2 new hospitals, one in the Negev in the south and one in the Galilee in the north, as well as build a new university in the Galilee and will establish another airport. With regards to religion, the coalition will seek to support competition in kosher services, will establish an egalitarian prayer section at the Western Wall, and will change the voting body that elects the chief rabbi of Israel to ensure that a Zionist rabbi is elected. Additionally, the coalition will work to further promote LGBTQ rights in Israel. With regards to judicial reform, the new coalition seeks to split the position of the Attorney General into 2. Additionally, the new coalition aims to introduce term limits on the position of Prime Minister, lower the cost of housing by building an additional 300,000 housing units, and submit a transportation plan for the West Bank. The coalition also seeks to crack down on illegal building in the West Bank. Another aspect of the coalition agreements includes an investment of some 2.5 billion shekels in fighting crime in the Arab sector, as well as bolstering the Arab communities through transportation and infrastructure. The new government will also seek to bolster Israel's status as a startup nation, setting a national goal for bringing the total number of high-tech workers in the economy to 15% of the labor force by 2026. As such, the unity government has set out a number of lofty ambitions. Whether or not they will be able to achieve all these goals, time will tell. Even though the members of the new coalition are optimistic and eager to embrace their new roles, the majority of Israelis feel differently and do not share in the optimism. A new poll by Hebrew language channel 12 News on Friday night revealed that 43% of Israelis believe the 36th government of Israel will be a short-lived one. Only 11% believed it would last the full 4 years term. With regards to the man who is set to become Israel's next prime minister, Naftali Bennett, when asked why Bennett joined the so-called change government, 61% of Israelis believe it is due to personal ambitions, while only 20% believe his motives are ideological. Though when asked if Bennett would uphold the rotation agreement with Yesh Atid's Yair Lapid, who is set to become prime minister second in the rotation, the majority, 49%, believed Bennett a man of his word, saying he would honor the agreement, while 29% believed that Bennett would not because the government would fall prior to the rotation, and only 7% said they believed Bennett would not uphold the agreement. The poll also asked respondents about some of the more controversial legislation that the unity government seeks to pass, namely to implement some type of limit on the premiership, so that a person who served as prime minister for 8 consecutive years will be required to take a 4-year break before running for the Knesset again. Here, the majority supported the move, 57% in favor versus 29% opposed. Similarly, when asked about judicial reform and if they supported splitting the role of the Attorney General into 2 positions, most Israelis, 62%, supported the proposition, while only 11% opposed it. So while many Israelis may not have faith that the newly formed coalition will last long, they do seem to support its policies. Israel's 36th government is set to be sworn in. The proceedings have already begun and are underway, marking an end to Benjamin Netanyahu's 12-year term as Israel's prime minister, the longest-serving prime minister in history. So what can we expect from today's ceremony, and more importantly, what can we expect from this new government? Here to answer these questions and more are Rabbi Dov Littman, former member of Knesset of Yesh Atid Party, and Emil Whiteman, head of the Libertarian Caucus in the Likud. Welcome. So everyone is on the edge of their seats. A lot of drama unfolding today with a member of Knesset from Ram saying he will vote against the government just hours before the swearing in of the ceremony. Some still believing that Benjamin Netanyahu will be able to, pull a rabbit out of his hat and essentially prevent the new coalition from being sworn in. The Knesset is convening at this very moment, as we speak. But it's going to be a long evening, right? Lots of speeches. Bennett will speak, Lapid, Netanyahu, and all the party factions. And as they say, it's not over until it's over. So at this point in time, though, does it look as though it is set in stone and Naftali Bennett will be sworn in as Israel's next prime minister? Emil Whiteman, let's start with you.
No, listen, as you said, it's never over until it's over, but it really is over. The government will be sworn in. I don't think there's very much of a doubt about that. Of course, the question is, what will this government do? And the reality is that it's a left-wing government with an overwhelming majority of left-wing members. This government only has a majority because part of the coalition is the Ram party, the Muslim Brotherhood party. It's really the Israeli branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, whose avowed goal is to erase the Jewish state. So I can't say that I'm optimistic. I think it's after 140 years of Zionism, this is the first time in the history of Zionism and the state of Israel that an Arab party actually becomes a player in the political decision-making of the Jewish state, of the Zionist movement. And it's not any Arab party. It could be an Arab party which recognizes the right of the Jewish people to its homeland and its land, but it's not. It's the Muslim Brotherhood, which is committed ideologically to wiping us out from the map. So I think what happened here is that we give these people legitimacy in exchange of political support for people whose public support is close to nil, but they only want to actually come to power. That it's only the will for power. It's only desire for power, lust for power.
Okay,
It's
well,
very, very.
let's stop there. Now I'd like
The worst
to
days in Israel's political history.
I'd like to turn now to Rabbi Littman. Now, many people are looking into this government and not giving it more than 6 months. Yet here we are. It's an ideal unity government with almost every member of the political spectrum included, even the Arab party, Ram, as Emil said. Now, they put together a very hefty list of principles they want to tackle. But, what are some of the main issues that this government must address in its first few days?
I think that your question is literally the answer to what Amir was saying. It is possible. It is possible. I'm not saying they'll succeed to put aside a lot of the extremes and put aside the disagreements and work on socioeconomic issues, on the economy, on health, on transportation, on all kinds of issues of inequality that exist in Israel, and really try to address a lot of the social issues that, what can I say, somehow haven't been addressed over the last 12 years. And it's very interesting to hear Representative Likud saying this is all about lust for power, or whatever it was said. Let's remember, all Netanyahu had to do was move aside, even become president of Israel, and you can have an absolute right-wing religious government without a problem. So I'm not saying this government is necessarily going to last. I know that it's definitely a risk. But I'm watching the proceedings in the Knesset, and I'm seeing something which who have been working for unity in Israel for many, many years, see as a beautiful attempt to try something. And as long as that Arab party is saying, we are here to help the Arab population in Israel, which is desperately in need of help in health and education and in other infrastructure issues, let's give that a try. If it doesn't work, we at least can look at ourselves and say, we have tried to bring a way to all of Israel to come together and work on the most pressing issues of the day, which have sadly not been dealt with. And not only have they not been dealt with, we've been actually pulled apart as a people along the way.
Now, Emil, do you agree with this? I mean, what would convince you that this government will be able to hold it together? And what do you think are the issues that need to be addressed?
Well, first of all, it's not a unity government. It's 61 members of the Knesset out of 120. So it's really a government by the shortest majority possible. This is not a unity government. By the way, the outgoing government was a unity government, for better or for worse, but it was. Governments in the 1980s, for instance, were a unity government when you had over 100 Knesset members in the coalition. Or when Sharon, the first government of Sharon, when it was also a unity government, when the Labour Party was together. You could even say that the government where the coalition where Dov Lippman was part of in 2013, 2015 was to a certain extent a coalition government. This is not a coalition government, certainly not when you have the largest party by far, the Likud, which is excluded from the coalition. So we're not talking about any sort of real national unity. So I would not build on a government like that to sort any of Israel's problem. I would be very happy already if it didn't cause too much harm.
Now, Rabbi Littman, you mentioned the socioeconomic issues that the government wants to tackle, but what are some of the issues that could be potential minefields for the coalition? I mean, we're already seeing they have some serious issues to address in the coming days, the flag march, the Eviatal settlement, tensions with the Palestinians. I mean, how do you see the coalition handling these with such differing ideologies?
There's no doubt that's going to be the greatest challenge, anything on a national ethnic level and anything on a security level. If we, God forbid, entered any kind of a security situation and then the government is dependent on the 4 seats of Ram and even in the Meretz party, that's where we're going to have some real challenges. But the reason why I say that there's more hope than people realize is because of the relationship between Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid. And this has to be emphasized over here. There is a friendship there. There's a trust there, as opposed to the past quote-unquote unity government where Netanyahu and Gantz had no ability to talk to each other and no trust for one another, besides when they were in the pit dealing with security issues. This actually has that. And I do believe they might be able to navigate through all of those issues in a very delicate manner, and they'll be able to make it last longer than people think. But again, that's one issue. And the other issue is issues of religion and state. It could be that if the more left-wing, liberal, progressive side of the government pushes too far on the religion and state issues, where the more right side, the conservative side, the religious side might feel we're losing the Jewish nature of the state, that's another minefield which they're going to have to navigate through. But again, their focus will be on these other issues, and they're going to try to mitigate all of the difficult issues to the side. I do know the ministers are ready to roll up their sleeves and get back to work in their individual ministries, and we'll have to see. And hopefully they'll be able to address some of the real pressing issues that exist in Israel today.
All right, Rabbi Dov Littman and Emil Whiteman, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Israelis have been on the edge of their seats all day on Sunday, awaiting to see if a new coalition will actually be sworn in, ending Benjamin Netanyahu's 12-year term as prime minister, or if Netanyahu would somehow manage to put an end to the unity government before it began. Here with the report is ILTV's Hannah Rifkin.
Israelis were eagerly awaiting to see if the 36th government of Israel would actually be sworn in on Sunday. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, one of the longest-serving democratically elected leaders in the world, was still fighting for his position over the weekend until the last minute in an attempt to prevent the coalition of change from taking power. According to a report on Channel 12, in a last-minute effort, Netanyahu offered Blue and White head and Defense Minister Benny Gantz the role of prime minister in exchange for leaving the unity government. According to the report, Netanyahu offered to resign and hand over the premiership to Gantz for the next 3 years. Gantz is said to have rejected the offer. Additionally, Netanyahu faced some harsh criticism from within his own party by a Likud member Nir Barkat. Barkat held a massive rally over the weekend to show his strength and to position himself as a potential replacement for Netanyahu in the next round of Likud primaries. And following the rally, he criticized the prime minister, saying if he had stepped aside, the Likud could have remained in power. Now, if the new government is sworn in today, this means that Benjamin Netanyahu will become head of the opposition and will have to leave his Balfour residence, which has become a symbol of the prime minister. When and how exactly this will happen remains unclear, as there is no official protocol. Though Netanyahu's aides have made it clear that if and when the time comes for him to give up the prime minister's chair, he will do so in a professional and orderly manner. In the meantime, Israelis are still torn over the prospect of the establishment of a new government without Netanyahu, and what exactly that new government will bring.
What I really think is that it's just a day today. It's not a legitimate government. It's very pretty sad that 80 seats, almost 80 seats in the parliament, the Knesset, belongs to the right wing, and they sold their soul and their ideology and their beliefs to the extreme left wing, just in one purpose: the hatred to Netanyahu, and to become a prime minister by stealing the votes. They did not vote for him to make a coalition with the left wing. And what's going to be? Who knows?
It's all about personal agenda, ego, and that's it. I'm in favor of whoever is going to do good to us. I mean, everybody who wants to do good is welcome. Nobody owns the power. Nobody owns. We don't have kings and we don't have princes. It's a democratic country, so-called. So let them try. Even though it's very weird, like, a person with 6 mandates is gonna rule, parties that even bigger than him and powerful than him. But this is the reality.
Now in other news, was Israel involved in an attempt by the Trump administration in Saudi Arabia to undermine Jordanian King Abdullah? According to a report published in the Washington Post this weekend, the United States and Saudi Arabia sought to pressure Jordan's king, whom they viewed as an obstacle to implementing the deal of the century, a deal which would have led to normalization with Saudi Arabia and a peace deal between the Israelis and the Palestinians. The reason was the king's unwillingness to relinquish control over the Muslim holy sites in Jerusalem, over which Jordan has authority, according to the report. And while the report explicitly says that those involved did not attempt to overthrow the king, their actions clearly weakened him. Now, with a new administration in the White House and a new coalition entering power in Israel, what does this report mean for Israeli-Jordanian relations and for Israel-Saudi relations? Here to discuss is Dr. Mordechai Kedar, Middle East expert and lecturer at Bar-Ilan University. So how damaging is this report for Israel? And what is the status now of Israel's relations with Jordan in general and with King Abdullah in particular?
Well, this is what happens in the world. As you know, there is a difference between a state and a superpower. A state shapes its own policies domestically and on the international arena, while a superpower shapes other countries' policy, domestic and on the international arena. And here the United States comes and tries to shape the policies of Jordan, of Israel, Saudi Arabia. And this is what superpower is doing. Russia is doing it. China is doing it. And this is what we saw. And this is how the world acts.
So what do you think now that the new coalition will need to do in order to restore ties with King Abdullah? Because regardless of what happened and what you say that this is how the world works, ties were harmed between Israel and Jordan.
No, it's not between Israel and Jordan. It's between Israel and the Jordanian house of kingdom. You know, the ruling family. It's not the state itself, because the state is many people who do not share much with the kingdom, and we have to understand this. What happened is definitely the ruling family in Jordan definitely have all kinds of grievances against Israel, against Saudi Arabia, against the United States, and against everyone who wants to impose its agenda. Okay, this is what it is to run a state. Once you have good relations with others, once you have problems with them. If you don't want to face times of hardship, you don't go to politics.
So at the end of the day, according to the report, right, the king was a major obstacle to implementing the deal of the century. And now that the deal has fallen through, does this mean that normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia is off the table as well?
Well, the normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia is not on the table, not because of Jordan. It is because of Iran. And Iran is the biggest threat on Saudi Arabia, way much bigger than on Israel. Because, as we saw already in mid-September of 2019, when Iran attacked during one night, like half of the oil production industry of Saudi Arabia, and the world didn't do anything against Iran, although it was definitely a casus belli. But Saudi Arabia is a weak country, unfortunately, militarily and internationally. So, so far, Saudi Arabia didn't retaliate for what Iran did. So the Saudis learned the lesson, and now they are very, very careful not to take steps with Israel against the will of the Iranians. And this is actually what made the Saudis not join the Abraham Accords.
All right, Dr. Mordechai Kedar, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
An Israeli security guard thwarted a terrorist attempt as he shot and killed a knife-wielding Palestinian woman at a checkpoint in the West Bank on Saturday, Israeli police announced. The incident took place at the Kalandia crossing near the city of Ramallah. According to the police, the 28-year-old woman approached the crossing and began running towards Israeli forces while holding a knife. When a civilian security guard saw the woman, he called on her to stop several times, but when she refused to stop, he fired at her. While a ceasefire agreement with the Hamas terrorist group in Gaza is still holding, tensions obviously still remaining high. Now let's take a look at the weather forecast with Hannah Rifkin.
And good to be here on such a beautiful sunny day, Lidar. Looking at this evening's temperatures, toasty lows are expected in the upper teens and 20s in Celsius. And tomorrow, highs mostly in the 20s and 30s. And now, back to the studio.
And now, before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel.
רוצח את כולם, מטפס על הסולם ממפלצת לא כדאי לסגר את המצב לרדת על אמת כפרה זורמת עולה ויורדת דופקת אספה ומושלמת כולם מבינים את העניין אולי יש מסיבת גג על הפיק יש על המייק אני מה נראה איזה שעת גמר
All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.25 shekels to the American dollar and 2.68 shekels to the Canadian dollar. And finally, for the latest updates and news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as to our newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Madar Gavelazi. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.